You treat her like a servant? Liam's voice thundered, silencing the room. Claire's smugness vanished as he gripped Nia's hand, jaws dropping around them. What sparked this explosive moment at a lavish Atlanta birthday party? Why was Nia, a brilliant black financial analyst, humiliated by her boyfriend's family? And how will her strength turn the tide? Stick around to uncover a story of resilience and redemption that'll leave you speechless. We want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? New York, London, or somewhere else? Drop your predictions in the comments. Will Nia triumph or will prejudice prevail? Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our latest videos. And share this journey with friends. Trust us, you won't want to miss how one woman's brilliance shatters a family's arrogance. Let's dive in. What's next for Nia? The Atlanta skyline shimmered like molten gold against the fading September sun, its glass towers casting long shadows over the restless pulse of the city. Nia Johnson stepped out of her sleek black sedan, her white dress, simple yet elegant, clinging softly to her frame, a quiet rebellion against the opulence around her. Her long, glossy black hair cascaded down her back, catching the last glimmers of daylight, and her deep brown eyes, sharp with intellect and warmth, scanned the entrance of the riverfront bistro. In her hands, she held a small, meticulously wrapped gift, its silver ribbon glinting like a promise. Tonight was no ordinary evening. It was the first birthday of Liam Carter's niece, a celebration hosted at his upscale restaurant, and Nia, a financial analyst whose name echoed in the halls of Apex Capital, was here to meet his family for the first time. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and the hum of anticipation as Nia approached the bistro's glass doors. Her heels clicked purposefully against the cobblestone path, each step a reminder of the worlds she'd conquered. Boardrooms where her strategies saved fortunes, conferences where her voice silenced skeptics. At 32, Nia was a force. Her career a tapestry of awards and admiration. Her presence a beacon in spaces that often tried to dim her light. Yet tonight, her heart thudded with a nervous rhythm. Liam, her anchor for the past year, had painted his family as traditional, but warm. "They'll love you, Nia," he'd said, his blue eyes crinkling with that boyish grin that melted her defenses. But Nia knew better than to trust promises blindly. She'd walked through too many doors where her skin, her very existence, was a question mark. Inside, the riverfront bistro was a vision of understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over mahogany tables, where guests in tailored suits and shimmering dresses mingled, their laughter weaving into the soft jazz drifting from a live band. Balloons in pastel pinks and blues bobbed above a central table, where a towering cake awaited the guest of honor, a cherubic baby girl blissfully unaware of the adult world's complexities. Nia's lips curved into a soft smile as she spotted the child, cradled by a nanny near the gift table. She placed her present, a delicate silver bracelet engraved with tiny stars, among the pile, her fingers lingering on the ribbon as if anchoring herself to something pure before facing the storm. "Nia, right?" The voice was sharp, slicing, through the hum of the crowd. She turned to find Claire, Liam's older sister, standing with her arms crossed, her blonde hair swept into a severe updo. Her green eyes, so like Liam's yet colder, appraised Nia from head to toe, lingering on the white dress with a flicker of disdain. Beside her stood Ethan, her husband, his broad shoulders squared in a navy suit, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're Liam's friend?" Claire's tone dripped with skepticism, the word friend a barbed hook. "Girlfriend," Nia corrected, her voice steady, her smile practiced but warm. "It's great to meet you, Claire. Liam's told me so much about the family." She extended a hand, but Claire's handshake was limp, her fingers retreating as if the contact was an inconvenience. Ethan didn't bother with pleasantries, his gaze sliding over Nia like she was a curiosity, not a guest. "Must be nice tagging along to family events," Ethan said, his voice low but cutting. "Liam's always been generous with his guests." The implication landed like a stone, heavy with assumptions about Nia's intentions. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. Years of navigating corporate prejudice honing her ability to mask the sting. "I'm here for the baby's birthday," Nia replied, her eyes meeting Ethan's with quiet defiance. "She's adorable." Liam said she's already stealing hearts. The pivot was deliberate, an attempt to steer the conversation to safer ground, but Claire's lips pursed, her expression a mask of polite contempt. "Oh, she is," Claire said, her tone clipped. "But let's not pretend you're here for the cake. Liam's business is doing well, isn't it? Must be tempting for someone like you." The words were a blade, cloaked in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nia's heart sank, the air around her growing heavier. "Someone like you." The phrase echoed with unspoken judgments, her race, her background, her very presence in their pristine world. Before Nia could respond, a woman in a pearl necklace, Margaret, Liam's aunt, joined them, her gray hair pulled into an elegant bun. "Claire, who's this?" she asked, her voice dripping with curiosity as her eyes raked over Nia's dress, her hair, her skin. The scrutiny was familiar, a silent tally of worth that Nia had faced in classrooms, offices, and now, here. "This is Nia," Claire said, her smile tightening. "Liam's latest interest. She's just dropping by." The dismissal was blatant, reducing Nia to a fleeting distraction in their family's legacy. Margaret's eyebrows lifted, her gaze sharpening like a hawk's. "Interesting," Margaret murmured, her tone laced with subtext. "You don't look like you're from around here. What do you do, dear? Or do you just enjoy Liam's hospitality?" The question was a trap, baiting Nia to justify her existence. The room seemed to close in, the jazz band's melody a cruel contrast to the tension coiling in her chest. "I'm a financial analyst at Apex Capital," Nia said, her voice clear, her chin lifting slightly. "I specialize in corporate restructuring. It's demanding, but I love the challenge." She let a flicker of pride color her words, a subtle assertion of her worth, but Margaret's lips curved into a condescending smile. "How quaint," she said, the word dripping with pity. "Must be exhausting working so hard to keep up." The jab landed and Nia's fingers tightened around her clutch, her nails biting into her palm. She wanted to fire back, to list her awards, her clients, the millions she'd saved, but this wasn't a boardroom. This was personal, and the battlefield was unfamiliar. The conversation shifted as Claire turned to greet another guest, but the damage was done. Nia stood alone by the gift table, her white dress a stark contrast to, the gilded opulence around her. The room buzzed with laughter, but she felt like an outsider. Her presence a puzzle the Carters refused to solve. She glanced at her phone, hoping for a text from Liam, but the screen was blank. He was still tied up in the kitchen, oblivious to the gauntlet she was running. As she moved toward a table, a cousin of Liam's brushed past, muttering, "Hope she's not expecting a free ride." The words were meant to be overheard, another pebble in the avalanche of slights. Nia's smile faltered, her brown eyes flickering with a storm she refused to unleash. She'd faced worse, clients who questioned her expertise, colleagues who underestimated her. But this was different. This was Liam's family, and their rejection wasn't just of her, but of the future she and Liam were building. The baby's laughter broke through the haze, a fleeting reminder of why she was here. Nia took a deep breath, straightening her spine. She was no stranger to challenges. Her career, her life had been forged in fire, but as Claire's sharp gaze found her again, Nia felt the weight of the night pressing down. This was only the beginning, and she steeled herself for what lay ahead, her resolve a quiet flame in the gathering dark. The riverfront bistro pulsed with the clink of champagne flutes and the sultry hum of a jazz trio, its notes weaving through the chatter of Atlanta's well-heeled guests. Nia Johnson sat at a round table draped in ivory linen, her white dress a soft glow against the room's gilded opulence. Her long black hair framed her face like a curtain, shielding the flicker of unease in her deep brown eyes. The baby's birthday party was in full swing, with pastel balloons bobbing above and laughter ringing out. But for Nia, the air felt like a tightening noose. Liam Carter, her boyfriend and the restaurant's owner, was still absent, tangled in kitchen duties, leaving her to navigate the Carters' icy reception alone. The initial barbs from Claire, Ethan, and Margaret lingered like bruises, but Nia steeled herself. She was no stranger to hostile rooms. This was just another stage. She sipped her sparkling water, the cold liquid a fleeting anchor as she scanned the table. Claire, Liam's sister, sat across from her, her blonde updo gleaming under the chandeliers, her green eyes sharp as she whispered to a cousin, her gaze darting to Nia with calculated disdain. Ethan, her husband, leaned back in his chair, his navy suit crisp, a smirk playing on his lips as he swirled his bourbon. Margaret, the aunt, was now flanked by another relative, a wiry man in his 50s, Uncle Harold, Nia gathered from the introductions, who eyed her with the detached curiosity of a man sizing up an intruder. The table was a tribunal, and Nia was on trial, her presence a puzzle they seemed determined to dismantle. "So, Nia," Claire began, her voice deceptively light, cutting through the table's murmur like a shard of glass. "How did you and Liam meet? I'm sure it's quite the story." The question was a trap, cloaked in politeness, but the tilt of her head and the faint curl of her lips betrayed her intent. Around the table, heads turned, eyes glinting with anticipation, as if Nia's answer might confirm their suspicions. "We met at a charity gala last year," Nia said, her tone warm but measured, her smile a practiced shield. "I was speaking on financial empowerment, and Liam was catering the event. We bonded over a shared love of jazz and community work." She let the truth shine through, hoping to bridge the gap, but Claire's eyebrows lifted, her expression a mask of mock surprise. "A gala? How ambitious," Claire said, the word dripping with condescension. "You must have been thrilled to catch Liam's eye. He's always been a magnet for interesting types." The table tittered, a soft ripple of laughter that felt like needles on Nia's skin. Her fingers tightened around her glass, but she kept her gaze steady, refusing to flinch. "Interesting is one way to put it," Harold chimed in, his voice gravelly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward. "You're in finance, you said? What's that like for someone like you? Must be tough breaking into a field like that." The phrase "someone like you" hung in the air, heavy with unspoken assumptions about her race, her place in their world. Nia's pulse quickened, but her years in corporate boardrooms had taught her to parry such jabs with grace. "It's challenging, but rewarding," she replied, her voice clear, her eyes locking onto Harold's. "At Apex Capital, I restructure failing companies, save jobs, and drive growth. My last project stabilized a $500 million firm. It's about strategy and impact, not breaking in." She let a flicker of pride color her words, a quiet assertion of her worth. But Harold's lips pressed into a thin line, his nod dismissive, as if her achievements were a parlor trick. "Impressive," Ethan said, his tone patronizing, his smirk widening. "But let's be real. You're probably here for the perks, right? Liam's restaurant is a gold mine. Can't blame you for wanting a piece." The accusation landed like a slap, blunt and unapologetic. The table stilled, the jazz band's melody a cruel contrast to the tension. Nia's heart thudded, her composure a fragile thread. She wanted to fire back, to lay bare her credentials, the Forbes feature, the industry awards, but the personal nature of the attack caught her off guard. "I'm here because I love Liam," she said, her voice low but firm, her eyes boring into Ethan's, "and because I care about his family, including his niece. My career speaks for itself." Her words were a shield, but the effort to stay calm was like holding her breath underwater. Claire's smile tightened, her fingers tapping her champagne flute. "Of course," Claire said, waving a hand as if to dismiss the tension. "But you must understand, Nia, our family's built on legacy. The Carters have a certain stature. Your work sounds charming, but it's not exactly our world." The word charming was a dagger, implying Nia's life, her very existence, was a quaint footnote to their empire of wealth and privilege. Nia's stomach twisted, but she refused to shrink. "My world is results," she said, her voice steady but edged with steel. "I build futures, not just portfolios. That's a legacy, too." Her words were a quiet defiance, but Margaret's chuckle, soft and dismissive, cut through the air like a blade. "Futures are nice, but money builds dynasties, Margaret," said her pearl necklace glinting as she leaned forward. "Have you ever worked on anything that matters? Real wealth, not just community projects?" The implication was clear. Nia's achievements, her blackness, were trivial in their eyes. Her jaw tightened, but her smile remained serene, a mask honed by years of navigating spaces where she was the only one who looked like her. The conversation shifted to the baby's gifts, but the air remained heavy. Nia ate slowly, her movements deliberate, her mind racing. She'd faced racism before, overt, subtle, systemic. But this was a different beast. These were Liam's kin, and their rejection wasn't just of her, but of the life they could build, together. She glanced at her phone, still no word from Liam. His absence was a void, leaving her to face the onslaught alone. As a server passed, Claire called out, "Nia, help clear these plates, would you? You're not doing much else." The request was loud, deliberate, drawing smirks from the table. Nia's hands froze, her eyes burning with a storm she refused to unleash. She rose, picking up a single plate, not out of compliance but to buy time, to keep her dignity intact. The room spun, the guests' whispers a chorus of judgment. She was Nia Johnson, a titan in finance, yet here she was reduced to a caricature, her worth questioned at every turn. The baby's giggle broke the spell, a fleeting reminder of why she stayed. Nia set the plate down, her posture unyielding. She was no stranger to battles, but this one was personal, and the war had only begun. As Claire's sharp gaze met hers, Nia felt the pressure mounting, a storm gathering strength. She was ready to fight, not just for Liam's love, but for her place in a world that dared to diminish her. The riverfront bistro's dining hall glowed under the soft flicker of chandeliers, the jazz trio's melancholy notes curling through, the air like smoke. Nia Johnson sat rigid at the ivory-draped table, her white dress a defiant beacon against the sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns. Her long black hair framed her face, a shield for the storm brewing in her deep brown eyes. The baby's birthday party had settled into its rhythm, plates of seared scallops and truffle risotto passing among guests, laughter punctuating the clink of silverware. But for Nia, each moment was a tightrope walk. Liam Carter, her boyfriend, remained absent, his restaurant duties a distant tether as she faced his family's relentless scrutiny alone. The Carters' earlier jabs had cut deep, but now, as dinner unfolded, their hostility sharpened, each word a blade aimed at her pride. Nia's fork hovered over her untouched plate, her appetite smothered by the weight of Claire's latest barb, still echoing in her mind. "Your work sounds charming, but it's not our world." She glanced around. The table, where Claire, Liam's sister, sipped her wine, her green eyes glinting with a predator's focus. Ethan, her husband, sprawled in his chair, his bourbon glass sweating as he traded smirks with Uncle Harold. Margaret, the aunt, sat poised, her pearl necklace a cold glint against her silk blouse, her gaze flicking to Nia like a judge assessing a verdict. The table was a battlefield, and Nia was its unwilling centerpiece, her presence a challenge to their gilded legacy. "Tell us, Nia," Ethan said, his voice loud enough to draw eyes from nearby tables. "How's it feel to be the odd one out here? I mean, you're not exactly Carter material, are you?" The question landed like a thunderclap, blunt and unapologetic, stripping away the veneer of politeness. Guests paused, forks stilled, as a ripple of uneasy laughter spread. Nia's heart pounded, her fingers curling into her napkin, but her face remained a portrait of calm, a skill honed in boardrooms where she'd been the only black woman. "I'm here for Liam and his niece," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locking onto Ethan's with quiet fire. "Family isn't about fitting a mold. It's about love and respect." Her words were a shield, but the effort to keep her voice even was like holding back a tide. Ethan's smirk widened. undeterred. "Respect's earned," he shot back, leaning forward. "And let's be honest, you're probably just riding Liam's coattails. Finance is a tough gig for, well, someone with your background." The word background was a loaded gun, its implication clear. Her blackness was a disqualifier. Nia's breath caught, the room tilting as the insult sank in. She wanted to unleash her resume, her restructuring of a $500 million firm, her Forbes recognition. But this wasn't about facts. It was personal, a public dismantling of her worth. Claire set down her wine glass, her smile a razor's edge. "Oh, Ethan, don't be so harsh," she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Nia's probably doing her best, but honey, you must admit, it's a stretch to think you belong at our table. The Carters build empires, not whatever. It is you do." The word whatever was a slap, reducing Nia's career to a trivial hobby. The table murmured, a cousin nodding as if Claire had voiced a universal truth. "My work saves companies and jobs," Nia said, her voice low but resonant, her eyes sweeping the table. "I've turned failing businesses into industry leaders. That's an empire too. One built on impact, not just money." Her defiance was measured, but the fire in her words burned bright. Margaret's lips pursed, her fingers tapping her fork with irritation. "Impact is sweet, dear, but it doesn't buy legacy," Margaret said, her voice smooth but cold as ice. "You're in over your head here. Liam's generous, but he'll see you're not cut out for this world." The words were a guillotine, slicing through Nia's resolve. Her chest tightened, the weight of their collective judgment pressing down like a physical force. She glanced at the empty chair beside her, Liam's absence a gaping wound. A server approached, offering more wine, but Harold waved him off, his gaze fixed on Nia. "Bet you got into finance through one of those diversity programs, huh?" he said, his tone jovial but venomous. "They hand out spots like candy these days." The accusation was a gut punch, dismissing her decades of grind, nights studying, deals won through sheer will. The table laughed, a cruel chorus that echoed in her ears. Nia's hands trembled, but she clasped them under the table, her nails biting into her palms. "I earned every step," she said, her voice unwavering, her eyes boring into Harold's. "Top of my class, full scholarship, no handouts. My results speak louder than your assumptions." Her words were a blade, but the effort to stay composed was exhausting, like running against a relentless wind. Claire's chuckle broke the silence, sharp and dismissive. "Of course," Claire said, waving a hand as if swatting a fly. "But let's not pretend you're here for anything but Liam's wallet. Girls like you always have an angle." The phrase, "girls like you," was a final blow, raw and unfiltered, stripping Nia's identity to a stereotype. The room spun, the jazz band's notes a mocking backdrop to her humiliation. She wanted to scream, to walk away, but love for Liam and the innocent baby kept her rooted. Nia took a slow breath, her posture unyielding, her brown eyes blazing with a resolve that refused to break. She'd faced worse, clients who doubted her, systems that excluded her. But this was a new kind of war, waged with smiles and whispers. The Carters thought they could diminish her, but Nia Johnson was forged in fire. As Claire's gaze lingered, cold and triumphant, Nia met it with a steady stare, a silent vow that she would not be broken. The night was far from over, and she would fight, not just for her place, but for the dignity they dared to trample. The riverfront bistro's dining hall shimmered with the fading glow of chandeliers, the jazz trio's mournful notes weaving through the clatter of silverware and the low buzz of Atlanta's elite. Nia Johnson stood near the edge of the banquet table, her white dress a stark contrast to the opulent chaos, its soft fabric clinging to her like a fragile armor. Her long black hair framed her face, a veil for the storm raging in her deep brown eyes. The baby's birthday party was winding down, guests drifting toward the dessert table where a pastel pink cake stood untouched. But for Nia, The night had become a crucible. Liam Carter, her boyfriend and the restaurant's owner, was still absent, lost in the kitchen's demands, leaving her to face the Carters' escalating cruelty alone. The dinner's insults had carved wounds, but now, as the evening neared its close, the family's prejudice surged toward a final devastating blow. Nia's hands trembled as she set down a plate she'd picked up moments earlier, a futile gesture to quell the rising tide of hostility. Claire, Liam's sister, stood a few feet away, her blonde updo glinting like a crown, her green eyes alight with a cruel triumph. Ethan, her husband, lounged against a chair, his bourbon glass empty, but his smirk sharper than ever. Margaret, the aunt, hovered nearby, her pearl necklace catching the light as she whispered to Uncle Harold, their glances darting to Nia like vultures circling prey. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and wine, but to Nia, it felt like the prelude to a public execution. "Nia, don't just stand there," Claire called out, her voice loud and deliberate, slicing through the room's hum. "The servers are swamped. Pick up those plates and take them to the kitchen." The command was a whip cracking across the dining hall, drawing gasps and smirks from the guests. Nia froze, her heart slamming against her ribs, her eyes burning with a mix of shock and fury. She was a guest, a partner, a woman whose financial acumen had saved empires, yet here she was being ordered around like a servant. "I'm not staff," Nia said, her voice low but steady, her gaze locking onto Claire's. "I'm here for the celebration, like everyone else." Her words were a quiet rebellion, but Claire's smile widened, predatory and unyielding. "Oh, come on," Claire said, stepping closer, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "You're not doing anything useful. Might as well lend a hand. It's not like you're contributing otherwise." The words were a blade twisting in Nia's gut, reducing her presence to a nuisance. The table nearby erupted in laughter, Ethan's chuckle the loudest, a cruel underscore to her humiliation. Nia's nails bit into her palms, her composure a fraying thread. She wanted to walk out, to let the door slam behind her, but the thought of Liam's niece, the innocent child at the heart of this celebration, kept her rooted. She glanced at the baby, giggling in her nanny's arms, and swallowed the fire in her throat. "I'll help clear one table," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, picking up a stack of plates not out of submission but to buy time, to hold her dignity together with trembling hands. As she moved toward the kitchen, Ethan's voice boomed. "Look at that. She's finally useful." The guests tittered, their eyes following her like spotlights. A server, a young man with a sneer, muttered as she passed, "Figure she'd end up doing the grunt work." The words were a needle, piercing the last of her restraint. Nia's vision blurred, her steps faltering, but she kept moving. Each plate a weight heavier than porcelain. In the kitchen's swinging doors, she set the plates down, the clatter drowned out by the chaos of clanging pots and hissing steam. A server bumped into her, not apologizing, her glance laced with contempt. "Keep up, princess," the server snapped, as if Nia's presence was an affront. Nia's chest tightened, the humiliation a physical ache. She was Nia Johnson, a titan, who'd turned failing companies into legends, yet here, she was nothing, a caricature crafted by the Carters' prejudice. Back in the dining hall, Claire wasn't done. "Nia, the dessert table's a mess," she called, her voice carrying over the jazz. "Wipe it down, would you? You're good at cleaning up, I bet." The command was louder this time, a public spectacle, drawing every eye in the room. Margaret nodded approvingly, her lips curling into a thin smile while Harold chuckled, his bourbon glass raised as if toasting her degradation. The guests whispered, their murmurs a chorus of judgment, some amused, others uncomfortable, but silent. Nia stood frozen, a damp cloth thrust into her hands by a smirking server. Her eyes burned, her throat closing as she gripped the cloth, its rough texture a mockery of her polished life. "This isn't my role," she said, her voice shaking but clear, her gaze sweeping the room. "I'm a guest, not your help." Her defiance was a spark, but Claire's laughter doused it sharp and merciless. "Guest?" Claire said, stepping forward, her heels clicking like gunfire. "You're Liam's fling, here for the free food. If you're not helping, you're just in the way." The words were a guillotine, severing Nia's dignity before the crowd. The room spun, the jazz band's notes a cruel serenade to her unraveling. A server nearby whispered, "Always knew she was out of place," the words slicing deeper than Claire's. Nia's hands shook, the cloth slipping to the floor. She wanted to scream, to hurl the truth of her worth, the millions she'd saved, the industries she'd shaped. But the weight of their stares pinned her in place. Her love for Liam, her hope for a future with him, was a fragile thread keeping her from shattering. She bent to pick up the cloth, not to comply, but to steady herself, her brown eyes blazing with a fire that refused to die. The baby's laughter broke through, a fleeting anchor in the storm. Nia straightened, her posture unyielding. The cloth clutched like a weapon. She'd faced worse, systems that excluded her, clients who doubted her, but this was a public stripping of her soul. The Carters thought they could break her, but Nia was forged in resilience. As Claire's triumphant gaze met hers, Nia stared back, a silent vow that she would endure, her strength a flame no scorn could extinguish. The riverfront bistro's dining hall lay in the fading glow of its chandeliers, the jazz trio's final notes dissolving into a hush that felt like the calm before a storm. Nia Johnson stood by the dessert table, her white dress a beacon of defiance, its soft fabric marred by a faint smudge from the damp cloth she clutched. Her long black hair framed her face, a curtain for the anguish in her deep brown eyes, now glistening with unshed tears. The baby's birthday party was unraveling, guests murmuring as they gathered their coats. But for Nia, the night was a wound. Laid bare, the Carters' relentless cruelty had stripped her dignity, their latest demand, wiping down tables like a servant, still echoing in the air. Liam Carter, her boyfriend and the restaurant's owner, had been absent, leaving her to face the onslaught alone. But now, the tide was about to turn. A sudden crash from the kitchen doors shattered the room's fragile quiet, heads whipping toward the sound. Liam burst into the dining hall, his chef's jacket unbuttoned, his blonde hair disheveled, and his blue eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to ignite the air. His face, usually warm with a boyish grin, was a mask of rage, flushed red as he scanned the scene. A server, pale and stammering, trailed behind him, her whispered report of Nia's treatment the spark that had set him ablaze. Liam's gaze locked onto Nia, her trembling hands clutching the cloth, and then swept to his family. Claire, Ethan, Margaret, and Harold clustered near the banquet table, their smugness faltering under his glare. "What the hell is this?" Liam roared, his voice a thunderclap that silenced the room. He strode to Nia's side, his movements swift and deliberate, gently prying the cloth from her fingers and tossing it to the floor like a discarded lie. His touch was a lifeline, warm and steady, but his eyes burned as he turned to his family. "You treat her like a servant? Nia, the woman I love, who's worth more than all of you combined?" The words reverberated, stripping the Carters' polished facade bare. Guests froze, champagne flutes stilled mid-air, as Claire's green eyes widened, her composure cracking like porcelain. "Liam, darling," Claire began, her voice smooth, but trembling, stepping forward with a placating smile. "We were just keeping things moving. Nia wasn't contributing, so—" Her words faltered as Liam cut her off, his hand slicing through the air. "Contributing," he snarled, his southern drawl hardening into steel. "She's contributed more to my life than you'll ever know. When this restaurant was bleeding money, when I was drowning in debt, Nia saved it. She's a financial genius at Apex Capital, restructuring empires while you sip wine and play gatekeepers. And you dare treat her like this?" His voice rose, raw and unyielding, each word a hammer striking at their arrogance. Nia's breath caught, a tangle of relief and pain twisting in her chest. His defense was a balm, but the memory of her solitary battle stung. Ethan shifted, his smirk gone, his bourbon glass forgotten on the table. Liam, calm down, he said, his tone gruff but uneasy. We didn't know she was important. We thought she was just— He stopped, the weight of his own words trapping him. Liam's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching as he stepped closer to Ethan, his presence a towering force. Just what? Liam demanded, his voice low but searing. A gold digger? A nobody? Because she's black? Because she doesn't fit your narrow, pathetic idea of legacy? The accusation was a lightning bolt, naming the prejudice Nia had felt all night. Margaret gasped, her pearl necklace clutched as if it could shield her from the truth. Harold's ruddy face paled, his bravado extinguished while guests whispered, their glances now laced with shock rather than judgment. Nia reached out, her hand brushing Liam's arm, a quiet plea for restraint. Liam, she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. I'm okay. It was a lie, but she needed him to see her strength, to know she hadn't broken. Liam's gaze softened for a moment, guilt flickering in his eyes, but his fury held firm as he turned back to his family. You're not okay, he said, his voice thick with emotion, his hand finding hers and squeezing tight. You shouldn't have to be. I should have been here stopping this from the start, but I'm here now and I'm done letting this slide. He faced Claire, his sister, his eyes boring into hers. You've humiliated the woman who saved my dreams, who's respected by the world, because you can't see past your own bias. I'm ashamed to call you family. The room held its breath, the weight of Liam's words a tidal wave crashing over the Carters. Claire's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. Liam, you're overreacting, she stammered, her voice thin. We were just ensuring she fits with us. The excuse was feeble, crumbling under the truth Liam had laid bare. Fits? Liam spat, his voice rising again. Nia's a visionary, stronger and smarter than anyone here. She's built a career from nothing, earned every accolade in a world that tried to shut her out. I love her, and if you can't respect her, you're pushing me out of this family. The declaration was a thunderclap, a line drawn in the sand that left no room for retreat. Guests turned, their murmurs rippling through the hall, some nodding in quiet respect, others stunned by the unraveling of the Carter facade. Nia's heart ached, a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Liam's stand was afire, burning away the night's wounds, but his absence earlier had left scars. She squeezed his hand, her brown eyes meeting his, conveying a silent strength. She didn't need rescuing, but his alliance was a spark that reignited her resolve. The jazz band's silence felt deafening, the chandelier's glow casting long shadows over the untouched cake and scattered plates. Liam turned to Nia, his voice softening but fierce. We're leaving, he said, his grip on her hand a vow. He led her toward the exit, his stride unyielding, ignoring Claire's faltering protests and Ethan's muttered apologies. The guests parted, their eyes following Nia, not with judgment, now but with a dawning awe. Margaret stood frozen, her lips parted, while Harold stared at his shoes, his bourbon untouched. As they reached the glass doors, Nia glanced back, her posture unyielding, her white dress a symbol of her unbroken spirit. The Carters had tried to diminish her, but Liam's fury had shifted the tide, exposing their prejudice to the light. The night was a battlefield, and though the war was far from won, Nia felt a flicker of triumph. She was Nia Johnson, and no amount of scorn could erase her worth. The Atlanta morning hummed with the pulse of a city waking, its skyline a jagged silhouette against a sky bruised with dawn. Nia Johnson sat at her glass-topped desk in the sleek, high-rise office of Apex Capital, her navy blazer sharp against the soft glow of her computer screen. Her long black hair was pulled into a low bun, a disciplined contrast to the turmoil still simmering in her deep brown eyes. 3 days had passed since the Riverfront Bistro's brutal night, where Liam's family had stripped her dignity, only for his fierce defense to reclaim it. The memory of Claire's sneers, Ethan's smirks, and the weight of that damp cloth in her hands lingered like a scar, Yet here, in the world she'd built, Nia was a titan, her financial acumen a sword no prejudice could dull. Today, she was ready to bury herself in work, to let numbers and strategies drown out the echoes of humiliation. Her office, perched on the 32nd floor, was a sanctuary of order. Polished wood, a single orchid in a porcelain vase, and a framed Forbes article heralding her as a financial trailblazer. She sipped her coffee, its bitter warmth grounding her, when a sharp knock broke her focus. Her boss, Evelyn Reed, a silver-haired woman with a gaze like steel, strode in, a thick dossier in her hands. "Nia, we've got a crisis," Evelyn said, her voice clipped but urgent. "Carter Realty's on the brink. Stocks are tanking globally, investors are pulling out. We need you to stabilize it. You're our best shot." Nia nodded, her professional mask slipping into place, but her pulse quickened as Evelyn slid the dossier across the desk. She opened it, her eyes scanning the cover page, and froze. Carter Realty. Principals, Claire Carter, Ethan Carter. The names hit like a fist, stealing her breath. Claire and Ethan, Liam's sister and brother-in-law, the architects of her humiliation at the birthday party. The ones who'd ordered her to wipe tables called her a freeloader and dismissed her as a nobody. Nia's hands tightened on the folder, her nails biting into the paper. The irony was a cruel twist. The family that had tried to break her now depended on her brilliance to save their empire. Her mind raced, torn between duty and the raw wound of their scorn. "Nia?" Evelyn's voice cut through, her brow furrowing. "You're pale. Everything okay?" Nia forced a smile, her years of navigating high-stakes rooms kicking in. She couldn't let personal pain cloud her professionalism, not when her reputation hung in the balance. "I'm fine," Nia said, her voice steady but taut. "Just surprised. I know the Carters personally. It's complicated." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but she didn't press, trusting Nia's track record. "You've got a week to prep for the first meeting," she said, rising. "Turn this around and it's another feather in your cap." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Nia alone with the dossier and the ghosts of that night. She leaned back, her gaze drifting to the city beyond her window, its towers glinting like promises. The assignment was a minefield. Saving Carter Realty meant confronting Claire and Ethan, facing their smug faces in a boardroom where she held the power. Part of her relished the chance to prove them wrong, to let her talent silence their prejudice. But another part, the part still raw from their laughter, their dismissal, dreaded the encounter. She closed her eyes, the memory of Liam's hand in hers, his voice roaring in her defense, anchoring her. He'd stood up for her, but this was her battle, and she'd fight it on her terms. The meeting was set for the following Monday at Carter Realty's downtown headquarters. Nia spent the weekend poring over financials, her laptop screen a blur of spreadsheets and market trends. Carter Realty was hemorrhaging, bad investments, overleveraged assets, and a PR disaster fueling the stock sell-off. Her mind churned with strategies, debt restructuring, investor negotiations, a bold rebranding. But each number, each graph, carried the weight of Claire's voice. "You're just in the way." Nia's jaw tightened, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just saving a company, she was reclaiming her worth. Monday arrived, crisp and unrelenting. Nia stepped into Carter Realty's glass-walled boardroom, her navy suit tailored to precision, her hair sleek, her brown eyes blazing with quiet authority. The room was sterile, mahogany table, muted, gray walls, but the air crackled with tension as Claire and Ethan entered. Claire's blonde hair was pulled back, her face pale, her green eyes wide with shock. "Nia?" she stammered, clutching her tablet. "You're the consultant from Apex?" Ethan, usually smug, looked ashen, his tie askew, his hands fidgeting. "Yes," Nia said, her voice calm but edged with steel, her gaze unflinching. "I'm here to save your company." The words were a gauntlet thrown down with surgical precision. Claire's mouth opened, then closed, her composure unraveling. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "Nia, about the party," he began. We didn't know who you were. We're sorry. Nia raised a hand, cutting him off, her expression unyielding. I'm here for the job, not your apologies, she said, her tone cold but professional. Your company's bleeding $10 million a day. Let's focus on that. Her authority silenced them, their guilt a palpable weight. She opened her laptop, projecting a restructuring plan, her voice steady as she outlined the crisis. Your debt's unsustainable, your investors are spooked, and your brand's toxic. I can fix it, but it'll take discipline. Claire and Ethan nodded, their earlier arrogance replaced by desperation, their eyes fixed on Nia as if she were their last hope. Nia's heart pounded, but her face was a mask of control. This was her arena, where her brilliance shone, but the sting of their past cruelty fueled her every word. She was no longer the woman they'd humiliated. She was Nia Johnson, the architect of their salvation, and they would see it. As the meeting ended, Claire's voice trembled. We need you, Nia. Nia met her gaze, her resolve a steel core. I'll do my job, she said, rising, her navy suit a symbol of her power. But trust is earned, and you're nowhere near that. She left the boardroom, the city's pulse beyond the windows syncing with her own. The battle was joined, and Nia was ready to wield her talent like a blade, carving a path through their prejudice. The Atlanta skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Apex Capital's 32nd floor conference room, its towers a testament to ambition and grit. Nia Johnson stood at the head of a polished mahogany table, her navy suit a sharp silhouette against the city's glow, her long black hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that swayed as she gestured at a projected graph. Her deep brown eyes, once clouded by the sting of the riverfront bistro's humiliation, now burned with unyielding focus. 2 months had passed since she'd been tasked with saving Carter Realty, the failing empire of Claire and Ethan Carter, Liam's sister and brother-in-law who'd once reduced her to a servant. The wounds of that night lingered, but here, in the crucible of numbers and strategy, Nia was a force, her brilliance a blade carving through doubt. Today, she was rewriting their story, and hers. The room buzzed with tension, a dozen investors and board members leaning forward, their faces a mix of skepticism and hope. Carter Realty's stock had plummeted, its $10 million daily losses a bleeding wound. But Nia's plan, debt restructuring, strategic divestitures, and a bold rebranding, was gaining traction. She clicked to a slide showing a stabilizing stock trend, her voice steady and commanding. We've secured commitments from 3 international funds, she said, her words slicing through the room's hum. Their $200 million injection will cover short-term debt, while our rebranding campaign, a focus on sustainable urban projects, is restoring market confidence. Her gaze swept the table, daring anyone to question her. Claire sat at the far end, her blonde hair loose, her green eyes fixed on Nia with a mix of awe and unease. Ethan beside her scribbled notes, his usual smirk replaced by a furrowed brow. The couple who'd once sneered at Nia's presence now hung on her every word, their company's survival tethered to her expertise. Nia felt their stares, a weight that stirred the memory of Claire's mocking voice. You're just in the way. She pushed it down, her focus laser-sharp. This wasn't about revenge, it was about proving her worth, not just to them, but to herself. The past 2 months had been a marathon of sleepless nights and high-stakes gambles. Nia had worked from her sleek office, her desk buried under financial reports, her phone buzzing with calls to London, Tokyo, and Dubai. She'd negotiated with hard-nosed investors, convincing them to bet on a sinking ship by pitching Carter Realty as a phoenix ready to rise. She'd redesigned their portfolio, selling off toxic assets and funneling funds into green developments, a move that earned reluctant nods from industry analysts. Each victory was hard-won, her mind a battlefield where self-doubt, fueled by the Carters' scorn, clashed with her relentless drive. Liam's support, his late-night texts of encouragement, had been a lifeline. But this was Nia's war, and she fought it alone. In board meetings, Claire and Ethan had transformed from adversaries to pupils, their questions hesitant but earnest. "Will the rebranding cover our PR mess?" Claire had asked once, her voice stripped of its former bite. Nia had answered, "With data, polls showing a 15% uptick in public perception." Her tone was professional but cold. She hadn't forgotten their cruelty, and while their deference was a start, it wasn't absolution. Ethan, once brash, now deferred to her, his, "What do you think, Nia?" a far cry from his party taunts. Their reliance on her was a quiet victory, but Nia kept her guard up, her heart still bruised. Today's meeting was a turning point. Nia clicked to a final slide, a projection of Carter Realty's stock climbing 20% in 6 months. "We're not out of the woods," she said, her voice resonant. "But the bleeding stopped. Your company's alive because we acted fast and smart." The room erupted in applause, investors nodding, some even smiling. Claire's hands twitched as if resisting the urge to join in, while Ethan exhaled, his relief palpable. Nia stood tall, her navy suit a symbol of her authority. But inside, her emotions churned, pride warring with the ache of that night's wounds. As the meeting adjourned, Claire approached, her heels clicking nervously. "Nia, that was incredible," she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. "We'd be finished without you." Her eyes searched Nia's, seeking a crack in her armor, but Nia's expression remained impassive. "This is my job," Nia said, her tone clipped, her brown eyes unyielding. "I deliver results, not favors. Your company's stable, but trust is another matter." The words were a quiet rebuke, a reminder of the chasm between them. Claire's face fell, her lips parting as if to speak, but Nia turned away, gathering her notes with deliberate precision. Ethan lingered nearby, his apology from their first meeting still unanswered, his silence a concession to her power. Nia left the boardroom, the city's skyline a canvas of possibility beyond the glass. Her success was undeniable. Carter Realty's stock had stabilized, its brand reborn under her vision, but the victory was bittersweet. She'd silenced the Carters' doubts, forcing them to see her as the titan she was. But their earlier cruelty lingered, a shadow no spreadsheet could erase. Liam's face flashed in her mind, his fierce defense a spark that had reignited her fire. But this triumph was hers alone, forged in the crucible of her resilience. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. A text from an industry contact. "Heard you're saving Carter Realty. Legendary, Nia." She allowed herself a small smile, her reflection in the steel doors a portrait of strength. The Carters had tried to diminish her, but she'd turned their failing empire into a stage for her brilliance. The war wasn't over. Claire and Ethan's deference was a start, not a resolution, but Nia was ready for the next battle, her talent a flame no prejudice could extinguish. The Atlanta evening draped the city in a velvet hush, its skyline, a mosaic of twinkling lights that mirrored the quiet hope stirring in Nia Johnson's heart. She stood in the dimly lit lecture hall of the Atlanta Business Forum, her navy blazer crisp against her white blouse, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders like a shield. Her deep brown eyes, once shadowed by the riverfront bistro's humiliations, now gleamed with a guarded optimism. Weeks had passed since she'd stabilized Carter Realty, her financial wizardry turning Claire and Ethan's crumbling empire into a beacon of recovery. The wounds of that night, Claire's sneers, the damp cloth thrust into her hands, still ached, but Nia's triumph had shifted the ground beneath the Carters. Tonight, as she prepared to speak on corporate turnarounds, she sensed a new chapter unfolding, one where prejudice might bend under the weight of truth. The hall buzzed with professionals, their notebooks open, their eyes fixed on Nia as she stepped to the podium. Her voice, clear and resonant, filled the space, weaving data with storytelling. A failing company isn't just numbers. It's people, dreams, futures. Carter Realty was bleeding $10 million a day, but with strategic cuts and global partnerships, we rebuilt its pulse. The audience leaned forward, captivated. But Nia's gaze caught a figure in the back row, her pearl necklace glinting under the lights. Margaret, Liam's aunt, the woman who'd once called her work quaint. Margaret's presence was a jolt, her posture stiff but attentive, her usual condescension replaced by something softer, almost curious. Nia's heart thudded, but she pressed on, her slides flashing projections of Carter Realty's 20% stock recovery. "Success demands vision and grit," she said, her eyes briefly meeting Margaret's. "No one hands you a seat at the table. You earn it." The words were a quiet rebuke, a nod to the night she'd been deemed unworthy. The audience applauded, but Margaret's hands remained still, her lips parted as if grappling with an unspoken truth. As Nia stepped down, fielding questions from eager attendees, Margaret approached, her steps hesitant, her gray bun slightly askew. "Nia," Margaret said, her voice low, almost fragile. "Your talk was eye-opening. I didn't realize the scope of what you did for Claire and Ethan." Her eyes darted away, then back, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her polished facade. Nia's jaw tightened, the memory of Margaret's dismissive chuckle at the party a sharp sting, but she nodded, her expression guarded. "It's my job," Nia said, her tone even but firm. "I deliver results, not miracles." The words were a boundary, a reminder that her brilliance wasn't for their absolution. Margaret's lips trembled, her fingers clutching her purse. "I was wrong," she said, the admission a crack in her armor. "I grew up thinking our way, our world, was the only one that mattered. You've shown me something different. I'm sorry." The apology was clumsy, raw, but real, a seed planted in soil long hardened by privilege. Nia studied her, the ache of that night warring with a flicker of hope. "Change takes action, not just words," she said, her voice softening but resolute. Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening, and stepped back, giving Nia space to breathe. Days later, Nia sat in a sleek coffee shop, its exposed brick walls a warm contrast to the city's chill. Claire had requested a meeting, her email uncharacteristically humble. "Can we talk, not about the company?" Nia arrived, her black sweater casual but her posture unyielding, her brown eyes scanning Claire as she entered. Claire's blonde hair was loose, her face stripped of its usual polish, her green eyes red-rimmed. She slid into the booth, her hands twisting a napkin into knots. "Nia," Claire began, her voice breaking, "I can't stop thinking about that night. What we did to you. It was cruel, and I was the worst of it." Tears welled, spilling over as she spoke. "I judged you by your skin, your place with Liam, because I was scared you didn't fit our legacy. But you're the one who saved us. I'm so sorry." Her words were a deluge, raw and unfiltered, each one a step toward accountability. Nia's chest tightened, the memory of Claire's command, "Wipe it down," cutting fresh. But she saw something new in Claire's eyes. Shame, not defensiveness. Nia sipped her latte, the warmth grounding her. "Sorry doesn't erase what happened," she said, her voice steady but searing. "You didn't just hurt me. You tried to erase me. I saved your company because it's my job, not because I owe you." Her words were a blade, precise and unflinching, but she paused, her gaze softening. "But I see you're trying. Show me change, Claire, not just tears." Claire nodded, wiping her eyes, her silence a promise to do better. Nia left the coffee shop, the city's pulse a rhythm of possibility. Margaret's apology, Claire's tears, they were seeds, fragile but real, planted in the wake of her triumph. She thought of Liam, his fierce stand that night, his love a steady anchor. The Carters' prejudice wasn't gone, but Nia's brilliance had cracked its foundation. As she walked, her phone buzzed, a text from an industry peer. "You're Carter. Realty win is all over the news. You're a legend." Nia smiled, her reflection in a shop window a portrait of resilience. She was Nia Johnson, and no scorn could dim her light. The Atlanta night unfurled like a velvet tapestry, its skyline blazed with 1,000 lights that danced across the Chattahoochee River's glassy surface. Inside the riverfront bistro, the same venue that had once been Nia Johnson's crucible, a softer glow prevailed. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a warm halo over a single, intimate table set for a private dinner. Nia stood by, the floor-to-ceiling windows, her white dress reminiscent of that fateful night flowing softly, a symbol of her unbroken spirit. Her long black hair cascaded in loose waves, and her deep brown eyes, once shadowed by humiliation, now shimmered with a quiet triumph. The Carter's prejudice had tested her, but her brilliance had reshaped their world, saving their company, and planting seeds of change. Tonight, with Liam Carter by her side, Nia was reclaiming this space not as a battleground, but as a celebration of her resilience. The bistro, usually a hub of Atlanta's elite, was closed to the public, its mahogany tables cleared save for one adorned with white roses and flickering candles. Liam had orchestrated this evening, a gathering for those who'd stood by Nia, close friends, colleagues from Apex Capital, and a few Carters who'd begun to see her truth. The air carried the scent of rosemary and roasted lamb, the kitchen's, a distant murmur beneath the soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers. Nia's heart swelled as she surveyed the scene, the weight of her journey settling into something lighter, something like hope. Carter Realty's recovery, her name now synonymous with financial genius, had silenced doubters. But this moment was about more than victory. It was about love, strength, and the future she'd fought for. Liam approached, his blonde hair catching the candlelight, his blue eyes warm with a devotion that had weathered the storm of his family's cruelty. His tailored blazer hugged his frame, but it was his smile, boyish yet fierce, that anchored Nia. "You look like a dream," he said, his southern drawl soft, his hand finding hers. His touch was a promise, a reminder of the night he'd roared in her defense, exposing his family's prejudice. "This is your night, Nia. You've earned every second of it." His voice carried a weight, an acknowledgement of his earlier absence and the vow he'd made to stand by her always. Nia squeezed his hand, her brown eyes meeting his, a smile curving her lips. "We earned it," she said, her voice steady, but rich with emotion. "You fought for me, Liam. That matters." Their bond, forged in the fire of that night, had deepened through her battle to save Carter Realty. Liam's late-night calls, his unwavering belief in her, had been a beacon when doubt crept in. Now, as they stood together, the bistro transformed from a place of pain into a sanctuary of their shared strength. The guests arrived, their laughter weaving into the jazz. A colleague who'd cheered Nia's Forbes feature, a friend who'd sent her encouraging texts during sleepless nights, and, surprisingly, Ethan, Liam's brother-in-law. Claire had declined, her absence a silent admission of the work she still needed to do, but Ethan's presence was a step, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet respect. He approached Nia, his tie slightly askew, his eyes hesitant. "Nia, I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice low. "What you did for us, it's more than we deserved." Nia nodded, her expression guarded but not unkind. "Results speak," she said, her tone firm. "Keep showing up, Ethan." Her words were a bridge, not a forgiveness, but enough to let him stay. The dinner began, plates of herb-crusted lamb and grilled peaches passing among the table, the conversation a tapestry of shared stories and admiration for Nia's feat. A colleague raised a glass, her voice ringing out, "To Nia Johnson, who turns impossible into inevitable." The toast drew cheers and Nia's smile widened, her heart a kaleidoscope of pride and healing. As dessert, lavender creme brulee arrived, Liam stood, his glass raised, the room falling silent. "Tonight's for Nia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes locked on hers. "You're unstoppable, a woman who reshapes worlds with her mind and her heart. I'm proud to love you, and I'll fight for us always." His words were a vow, echoing his stand that night, but softer, a promise woven into their future. Nia's eyes glistened, her hand finding his under the table, the warmth of his touch a grounding force. She rose, her white dress catching the light, her voice clear and resonant. "Thank you, all of you," she said, her gaze sweeping the table. "This journey wasn't easy. I faced doubt not just from others but from myself. But I learned my worth isn't defined by those who can't see me. It's in what I build, who I love, and how I rise." Her words were a declaration, a reclaiming of the space that had once sought to diminish her. The guests applauded, Ethan's clap tentative but genuine, a sign of the change she'd sparked. The night wound down, guests departing with warm embraces, leaving Nia and Liam alone by the windows. The city sparkled beyond, its skyline a canvas of dreams Nia had helped shape. Liam pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. "You're my home, Nia," he whispered, his voice a melody of devotion. She leaned into him, her brown eyes tracing the horizon, a smile blooming. "I'm my own home too," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "And I'm just getting started." The words were a vow to herself, a testament to the fire that had carried her through prejudice and pain. The Carters' shift, Margaret's apology, Ethan's respect, was a start, but Nia didn't need their validation. She was Nia Johnson, analyst, lover, warrior, her legacy etched in the lives she'd touched and the barriers she'd shattered. As they stepped into the night hand in hand, the Atlanta breeze carried a whisper of possibility. The stars above mirrored the light in Nia's eyes, a constellation of resilience that no darkness could dim. The road ahead was hers to forge, and with Liam by her side, she was ready for whatever lay beyond the horizon. And so, Nia Johnson's journey leaves us with a powerful truth. Resilience and talent can reshape even the hardest hearts. What did you think of Nia's story? Did her strength inspire you, or did the Carters' shift surprise you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this tale resonated with you, wherever you're tuning in from. A huge thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. Your support lights up our storytelling. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next story, where new heroes rise and challenges unfold. Until then, keep shining your light just like Nia. We'll see you soon.